P-Vision is sharing with you a book that teaches us how to achieve success, titled Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. Unlike many books on similar topics, it doesn't teach us how to get rich or provide principles for success. Instead, it shows us that your success and achievements depend on your mindset and how you think about your own abilities. The author, Carol Dweck, is an outstanding scholar in the fields of behavioral psychology, social psychology, and developmental psychology. She was formerly a professor at Columbia University and is currently a professor of psychology at Stanford University, as well as a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Through many years of research, she demonstrates that simply by recognizing and understanding the mental framework behind your behaviors and choices, you can fully develop yourself and change your destiny. Now, let's listen to a segment from P-Vision titled Core Mindset for Growth, distinguishing fixed and growth mindsets from the book Mindset. Throughout this book, the author outlines the concept and differences between two important types of mindsets that influence personal success and development: the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. What is a fixed mindset? It's a way of thinking that believes one's abilities don't need to change. Conversely, a growth mindset believes that our abilities can be improved through continuous learning and effort. This may sound simple, but the real challenge lies in understanding the paradox behind our own behavior. Why, when we know that growth requires a desire for change, do many still believe they don't need to change? Why, even when we understand that effort and diligence are core to progress, do we often fail to sustain effort, perseverance, or a hardworking spirit? The most important factor for success here is mindset. To succeed, we need a growth mindset. In reality, fixed and growth mindsets exist all around us and coexist within you, or you might even be using a false growth mindset. You cannot easily distinguish a person as having a purely fixed or purely growth mindset. That's why we need to understand the true nature of the fixed mindset, explore the factors that hinder real progress, and find ways to transform and apply a growth mindset in life. The author has identified 5 aspects to recognize your own mindset. The first aspect is to reevaluate how you perceive external evaluations and how you self-assess. This is also a core factor hindering true progress. Reevaluating how you receive feedback. Evaluation is something none of us can avoid. Every day, we evaluate others, and others evaluate us. Some things have clear evaluation criteria, such as exams. However, many things lack specific evaluation standards. For example, whether a homemade dish is delicious mainly depends on if it suits the family's taste. Therefore, most evaluations are subjective and don't hold much objective meaning. Nevertheless, because evaluation is an important form of human interaction, it still profoundly affects our emotions and behaviors. The author conducted an experiment with a group of 4-year-olds to see if they would choose an easy puzzle or a more difficult one. The result was that many children chose the easy one because doing so allowed them to avoid making mistakes. This is a typical manifestation of a fixed mindset. What was important to these children was not the enjoyment of the process of tackling harder challenges, but rather completing the easy task to receive positive feedback. This kind of irrational behavior accompanies us from childhood into adulthood. The author asked many people, "When do you feel smart?" Those with a fixed mindset often replied, "When I don't make mistakes, when I complete a task quickly and perfectly, or when others can't do something, but I can solve the problem." These answers show that they always use comparison with others as a benchmark, seeking perfection and fearing mistakes. In contrast, those with a growth mindset would typically answer, "When I faced a very difficult task that I couldn't do before, but through effort, I overcame it." Or, "When I researched something for a long time and finally came up with an idea." These answers indicate that they are more concerned with whether they are willing to directly face challenges and whether they are making progress, rather than focusing on external evaluations. If a person only likes good evaluations and fears receiving bad ones from others, they will be even less able to objectively evaluate themselves. Those with a fixed mindset live in a constant conflict between proving themselves and protecting their fragile ego. If they receive good evaluations, they are happy, but at the same time, they fear losing those good evaluations in the future. If they receive bad evaluations, they are severely hurt, may feel emotional loss of control, argue with others, or become sad and take time to recover mentally. At this point, they often swing between two extremes, arrogance or insecurity. Swinging towards arrogance, they tend to believe they are superior to others, that others cannot do things as well as them, and hope that those around them will listen to them. Why do some people, when others express differing opinions, immediately become offended, sad, irritable, and angry? Because they feel that you have your fixedness, I have my fixedness, but if you use your fixedness to challenge my fixedness, that's wrong. You're challenging my authority and my ego. Therefore, such individuals become even more stubborn in their views and believe that they don't need to change. When swinging towards the extreme of insecurity, many people tend to hide their feelings of inferiority. They easily avoid difficulties and challenges. When facing many things in life, they often choose not to try, because if they don't speak or act, they won't make mistakes. There was an experiment conducted at the University of Hong Kong. The curriculum and instruction were all in English. For a newly admitted student who was not yet proficient in English, the rational choice would normally be to quickly improve their English skills. However, when the author surveyed students about whether they wanted to attend extra English classes, many replied, "I'm not interested." They preferred to accept low academic results rather than confront their weaknesses. This is the essence of a fixed mindset, protecting one's abilities from needing to change, and it is also the core factor that prevents a person from truly progressing. I admit that when I was in school, I used a fixed mindset. I was afraid to raise my hand to speak or ask questions. Looking back now, that was me using a fixed mindset when facing problems. A person with a growth mindset would consider making a mistake as an opportunity. If I say something wrong, it's okay, because if I say it, the teacher will know and can correct me. Just like how Jewish people educate their children very well by encouraging them to speak up immediately if they have any differing opinions in class, because if they don't speak, the teacher cannot correct them. This is the foundation for instilling a growth mindset in children. So, how can one perceive oneself more objectively? The answer is that you need to shift your mindset to a neutral position, much like Confucius's doctrine of the mean. That is, not swinging towards arrogance or self-importance, nor getting stuck in inferiority complex or shyness. I know what I'm doing. I still have things I need to improve, and I know I have hope to do even better. This is how you can objectively evaluate yourself. And as long as you have an objective mindset when evaluating yourself, you will no longer need to overly concern yourself with proving yourself to others, nor will you be affected by external evaluations. Instead, you can better focus on what you need to do, what I should do. This is also the first aspect for you to recognize and renew your mindset. Reevaluating your initial reaction when something happens. Another important aspect is to reevaluate your initial reaction when faced with undesirable events. Imagine this situation. In the morning, you leave home and are pulled over and fined by traffic police. At the office, you discover you're late and get reprimanded by your boss. In a meeting, your idea is rejected by the leader. And that evening, you have a big argument with your partner. How would you react at this moment? A person with a fixed mindset would think, "Today is so unlucky, so terrible," and then a series of negative emotions would arise. This person would think of the most pessimistic things. "This job isn't right for me. Even my partner doesn't understand me. The whole world is against me. Life is so unfair." On the other hand, people with a growth mindset would not easily identify themselves with negative emotions because their initial reaction is to focus on improvement and finding solutions instead of complaining. "Next time I drive, I'll have to pay attention. I'll manage my time better, wake up a little earlier. Why did the leader reject my idea in the meeting? Was it because I didn't present it clearly enough? What important lesson can I learn from my boss's feedback?" And they also wouldn't bring their bad mood home, demanding their partner or family do everything to please them. This is the perspective a person with a growth mindset would take when thinking about a problem. A typical example is the tennis player John McEnroe. He was a very famous star at the time, but his career quickly ended. Why? Because he was recognized as someone with a fixed mindset. When he hit a bad shot, he often blamed the racket, the umpire, or the noisy crowd on the court. In contrast, Tiger Woods, the golf legend, plays a sport where the surrounding environment is also very important. When spectators talk, click cameras, or when phones ring, it all affects the player. If it were an athlete with a fixed mindset, they would get angry, criticize the spectators, the organizers, and argue with them. But Tiger Woods' method was to train with his father, who intentionally made noise, startled him, and threw things in his direction when he was hitting the ball. Tiger used this type of training to adapt to a noisy environment, and this is precisely a growth mindset. That's why his career lasted for a very long and sustained period. In essence, behind the act of blaming the outside world is a psychology that seeks to comfort oneself when something bad happens. It's not good because the target was too difficult compared to last year. Or, my roommate keeps causing problems, making me feel bad and affecting my work performance. There's a quote from John Wooden that says, "When you start blaming others, you've already failed." Therefore, to break free from the fixed mindset pattern, what we need to learn is how to confront and adjust our initial reactions to difficulties. Instead of complaining, strive for improvement and actively train yourself. These initial reactions will be the foundation for you to overcome challenges and grow stronger. The next aspect is to reevaluate your own view on effort. Do you think that hard work is necessary, but to succeed, one also needs innate ability? If your answer is yes, it's very likely that you are thinking within a fixed mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe that talent and innate intelligence are what lead to success. When this kind of thinking arises, you inadvertently limit yourself. Have you noticed that in school there were always some kids who made you think, they don't study day and night like me, but their grades are always high? There are always such perfect kids who exist, and many people feel envious or admire that friend, believing they have innate intelligence while they themselves are not as lucky. In reality, perhaps those high-achieving friends secretly put in effort at home, but simply don't like to show how hard they study. Both your mindset and that of these friends reflect a truth. Everyone understands that diligence is extremely important in learning, but they don't consider hard work something to be proud of. People prefer to be praised for their talent and intelligence rather than being recognized for their effort, because praise for talent helps you stand out from others. However, if people think this way, they will easily make excuses for themselves, believing that effort makes no difference. From then on, they won't want to put in effort to train and persevere. In the long run, they will tend to choose jobs that don't require effort and can still be done well. A question here is, can we be sure that if we diligently strive for growth, we can truly develop? The answer is yes. Growth means making an effort to improve one's abilities in a particular area. Growth is inevitable because our minds are like muscles. The more we use them, the stronger they become. Secondly, remember that everything can be learned, so by simply learning, you are sure to improve. The author of this book once organized a workshop on sustaining neurodevelopment for children. Many people believe that whether a person is smart, average, or unintelligent is unchangeable throughout life. But the author explained that the brain is a mysterious organ. It's like a muscle that can change. The more you use your brain, the stronger it becomes. The more you challenge yourself to learn, the more the cells will grow. Things you once thought were very difficult and impossible to accomplish, like learning something new or solving an algebra problem, will become simpler with regular practice because your brain has been strengthened. Do you think drawing is a talent and only a few people can do it? Betty Edwards once organized a 5-day drawing class. People who had no artistic talent but participated seriously were able to draw very beautiful self-portraits. Drawing is considered a talent because people don't understand the constituent elements of drawing ability. In reality, to draw well doesn't depend on drawing skills, but on observation skills, the ability to perceive the relationships between edges, spaces, objects, light, shadow, and the overall picture. Drawing requires us to learn component skills and then combine them into a complete process. Of course, some people have innate talent. They might naturally pick up these skills in life. However, even without innate talent, we can still learn to acquire these skills. Therefore, if you want to pursue growth, you need to immediately change your perspective on effort. As long as you have faith in pursuing growth, are willing to learn, you will step out of your comfort zone, give yourself a chance to try, then focus and persevere in practice, and you will certainly achieve remarkable development. Next, we need to re-examine our overemphasis on achievement. Psychologists measured brain waves of two groups of people, those with fixed mindsets and those with growth mindsets, after a testing experience. They found that for people with a growth mindset, the brain region that lit up was when they heard an analysis of why an answer was correct or incorrect. For people with a fixed mindset, the brain region lit up when the results, right or wrong, were announced. Results and achievement are what they care about most. For example, many students often care too much about their rank in a test. If they get 8 questions right and 2 wrong, it's fine, as long as others only got 5 or 6 right, then they feel very happy because many others are not as good as them. This is a typical fixed mindset. The point of interest in their brain is the result, allowing them to see who they surpassed, where they rank, what their achievement is. People with a fixed mindset like to see others as inferior to them. When those around them succeed, they feel disappointed. A person with a growth mindset does not think this way because they are willing to learn from those stronger than them. And the final aspect is how we view failure. Losing a job, failing an exam, getting bad grades, being rejected, etc. For many, these are considered failures. When faced with failure, do you perceive it as an action or an identity? A person with a growth mindset will view failure as a temporary action, a part of the learning process. Today I wasn't successful means I haven't developed yet, but in the future I can change for the better. If not in this area, then another area will be suitable for me. Failure is not something terrifying, but merely a necessary step backward to move forward. But a person with a fixed mindset attaches an identity to the action. I am a failure. They begin to identify themselves with failure and feel as if they are incapable of changing, unable to do anything more than accept the identity of a failure. They cannot see failure as a lesson for progress, but only as a sign that they are not good enough. From that point, they cannot truly make changes and become overwhelmed by negative emotions. These are the aspects that help you better distinguish between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Now, let's talk about specific methods to transform a fixed mindset into a growth mindset. From the aspects above, we can see that the core way to let go of a fixed mindset is to abandon the ego, just as in Buddhist philosophy. It's like a practice of transcending the ego, letting go of attachments and the arrogant ego, the insecure ego. Releasing the shackles of external evaluations to objectively evaluate oneself and do what one should do. At that point, you will find every experience in life very simple. But this is always the most difficult thing because our bound ego is very heavy. Therefore, the first thing to transform your mindset is to let go of the ego. The author offers some advice. First, start by accepting yourself. When you find yourself having fixed mindset thoughts, don't rush to criticize yourself. When you criticize yourself, you are actually sinking deeper into a fixed mindset. Recognize, I've exhibited a fixed mindset. I accept it. I know I have this issue. Second, observe yourself. You need to carefully consider what causes you anxiety and insecurity. Understand what triggers the fixed mindset within you. When the fixed mindset takes over your mind, how did you choose to act? When you have the ability to self-examine and reflect in this way, the mindset concepts you learn will become effective. Step 3 is to remind yourself that the fixed mindset can change. This is also very important. Once you have recognized your mindset characteristics, no matter what your emotions are, you need to remind yourself that this can change. You can absolutely acquire abilities through learning and practice. After letting go of attachments and the bound ego, you need to take action. If a person only has positive thoughts without specific and sustained action, that person is using a false growth mindset. It's like constantly injecting oneself with anesthetic thoughts without any practical change. One manifestation of a false growth mindset is believing that effort is everything. In reality, effort is very important, but it is not everything. If a person constantly forces themselves to make endless efforts and not allow themselves to stop, their life will fall into a state of chasing achievements, completing one goal after another. And for their children and partners, they will also easily demand more effort, believing that what they are doing is not diligent enough. How to make that effort effective is the key point that a growth mindset needs to focus on. Another manifestation of a false growth mindset is pursuing a growth mindset to the point of confidently believing, I have a growth mindset, and I can do anything. If you continuously hypnotize yourself with this phrase, it will become a cliché. Truly, we cannot do everything well or excellently. If you preach this saying to your children, you can do anything, it doesn't actually have a good influence on them. The reasonable approach is to discover your child's strengths, and for yourself as well, know what you are suited for and where your strengths lie. Then, encourage your children and yourself to constantly strive and challenge yourselves. The important thing is to do well in step 1. Let go of the ego. If you can release the shackles of your ego from external and self-judgment, abandon negative emotions like anger and sadness, stop blaming and complaining when things don't go your way, let go of the fear of failure and excuses for not trying, then at this moment, you will be able to fully focus on yourself, see your strengths, and do what needs to be done for yourself. And one of the best ways to act is through deliberate practice. For more on this, you can refer to a previous book I introduced. In summary, nothing is learned all at once. The most effective method for personal progress is to regularly see your own progress by challenging yourself with small and easy things first, then using deliberate practice to gradually increase the difficulty, continuously challenging yourself. Ultimately, to change your fundamental mindset, this is not an overnight task. It requires you to persistently maintain this habit continuously. Through this book, we have learned the important difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, and I hope that through this, everyone can reflect on themselves and strive to become a person with a growth mindset, taking firm, strong, and steady steps on their chosen path.